Duskfall always woke up tired. The sun didn't rise so much as drag itself between the leaning towers, brushing enough light across the cracked streets to remind people they were still here. Jonas Hale moved through the morning crowds with his hood pulled low, carrying the small metal inhaler his brother needed to get through the day. He held it like it might dissolve if anyone looked too close. He stopped by their one-room shelter, where his brother Ren was curled under a patched blanket. Ren's breathing rattled like a loose screw in a rusted engine. "Stay with me, kid," Jonas whispered, brushing hair from Ren's forehead. "I'll find a way. I promise." Promises were cheap here. But Jonas still made them. He headed to the market alleys next, where stalls were held together with rope, scrap, and stubbornness. That's where he always found her, Lyra. She knelt over a scattered pile of machine parts, purple skin glowing faintly under the neon strips. When she looked up, her eyes softened. "Jonas, you look worse than usual," she teased gently. "Meaning you slept, what? An hour?" "Half," he admitted. Ren's cough got bad again. Her expression tightened with worry. She stood, wiping grease from her hands. "I told you, I can help. There's a cargo hub looking for mechanics. I can vouch for you. My employment chip is dead. They won't take me." He tried to smile, but it felt thin. "I won't drag you into my mess." "Too late for that," she said, stepping closer. The closeness warmed him. Her voice softened. "You're not a burden, Jonas." Before he could say anything back, a sudden crash echoed from the market's entrance. Corporate enforcers in matte gray armor stormed in. Panic erupted. Stalls flipped. People scattered. One of the enforcers pointed at Jonas. "Target located. Secure him." Jonas froze. "What? They surged toward him. Lyra grabbed his wrist, pulling him between crates. "Run." They sprinted through the maze of tight alleys, but Jonas stumbled when something hit his leg, a stun pulse that numbed everything. He fell hard. Enforcers swarmed around him. "Jonas Hale," the lead enforcer announced. "You're under arrest for breach of corporate security. Sentence: conscription into the chase circuit." "I didn't breach anything," Jonas shouted, voice rough with disbelief. The enforcer didn't care. "Survive 30 days. Fail, and your brother's treatment is forfeited." Jonas felt the world tilt. This was a death sentence dressed like a game show. Lyra knelt beside him before they dragged him away, cupping his cheek with trembling fingers. "Jonas, please. Stay alive. I'll find a way to reach you." Their foreheads touched for one brief, breathless moment, tender, desperate, intimate. "I'll come back," Jonas whispered. "I swear." And then they tore him from her arms. The first thing Jonas smelled when he woke was metal, hot, sharp, burning like a live wire. He opened his eyes to a transport cage rumbling along steel rails. Drones hovered outside the metal slats, each glowing with the cold blue light that meant they were already broadcasting. Millions of eyes on him, waiting for the show to start. A voice crackled through an overhead speaker. "Contestant Jonas Hale. Entering Territory 1, the Iron Quarter." The cage stopped. The door unlatched. Jonas stepped out into a wasteland of slanted, half-collapsed factories. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes. Conveyor belts hung like dead vines. It was a maze designed to confuse, corner, and break. He scanned for exits, strategies, weapons, anything. Then the announcement came. Breakers deployed. Jonas's pulse hammered. The breakers were the elite hunters. Mercenaries with augmented armor and tracking implants. The ones people bet on to kill contestants before sundown. A metallic thud echoed far off, steady and rhythmic. Heavy boots. Several pairs. moving fast. Jonas ducked behind a rusted steel beam and forced himself to breathe silently. "You still think this place plays fair?" a voice whispered behind him. Jonas spun, fists raised. A lanky figure stepped out of shadow, hands open in peace. Messy hair, dark eyes, coat patched with a dozen fabrics. He looked like someone who lived between lines rather than on them. "Name's Soren," he said. "Been slipping through these circuits longer than you'd guess." "You a contestant?" Jonas asked warily. "No, I'm a smuggler. Used to hack the feeds. Now I help the ones the corporation wants dead." Soren tilted his head. "Meaning you?" Jonas hesitated. "Why me?" "Because you're framed, and someone wants you erased before you ask questions." The ground trembled, heavy steps. "Breakers." Soren grabbed Jonas's jacket. "No time. Move." They darted through a collapsed loading dock and slid behind a shattered wall. Jonas peeked through a gap and saw them, 3 breakers in matte black armor advancing with predatory patience. Leading them was Cade Metrix, a man Jonas recognized instantly. His gut clenched. Cade used to supervise the transit division, back when Jonas had a job. Back before everything fell apart. Cade's voice carried. "Hail. Come out now, and maybe I'll make it quick." Jonas's hands curled into fists. "He was part of the shutdown that ruined my life." Soren raised an eyebrow. "Then you've got personal stakes." "Great. Those always end well." Jonas shot him a look. "Joking," Soren whispered. A drone swooped lower, scanning. Soren tugged Jonas deeper into the maze of machinery. Far above, in a hidden corner of Duskfall, Lyra leaned over stolen equipment, fingers fluttering across a console she'd rebuilt from scrap. Her purple skin glowed dimly in the neon light as she tapped into the circuit surveillance net. "Come on, Jonas," she murmured, breath trembling with fear and something deeper. "Tell me you're all right." The feed flickered. She caught a glimpse of him, running beside a stranger, dodging cranes and rusted beams. The sight punched relief through her chest, so intense it almost hurt. Back inside the iron quarter, Jonas and Soren slid into an old assembly line tunnel. The hum of breakers echoed behind them. "We need a distraction," Jonas said. Soren grinned. "Lucky for you, chaos is my specialty." He pulled a small device from his coat, pressed a button, and somewhere behind them, a row of gas canisters erupted. Fire burst in a chain reaction, swallowing the walkway and forcing the breakers to retreat. Jonas stared. "That'll slow them?" "For 5 minutes," Soren replied. "Maybe." Jonas exhaled, mind racing. The circuit was worse than he imagined. Unfair. Predatory. Rigged. And he was right in the center of it. "This is only day 1, Soren reminded him. Jonas tightened his jaw. "Then day 1 isn't killing me." Night in the second territory didn't fall gently, it dropped like a guillotine. The skies above the Ridge District turned deep blue, streaked with red warning lights from drones sweeping the cliffs. Jonas and Soren had been climbing for hours, slipping through crevices and old mining shafts while breakers hunted below. The metal band of the contestant tracker around Jonas's wrist blinked in steady rhythm, reminding him he was still prey. "We'll camp here," Soren whispered, leading him into a narrow ravine where the wind howled through the stone ribs of the mountain. "Breakers won't risk these cracks. They jam their comms." Jonas nodded, but he couldn't relax. His mind kept drifting to Lyra, her voice, her steady hands, the way she'd promised to find him. He missed her more sharply than he expected. Then a shimmer of violet light flickered behind a boulder. Jonas's breath caught. Only one person glowed like that. A soft, familiar voice whispered, "You really didn't think I'd stay behind, did you?" Lyra stepped into the moonlit ravine, her purple skin reflecting the cold air like polished stone. Her eyes met Jonas's, and everything he'd been holding together suddenly wavered. "Lyra," he said, stepping toward her, not quite believing she was real. She closed the distance first, pressing her forehead to his in a breath of aching relief. "You're alive," she murmured, fingers brushing his cheek as if afraid he'd disappear. "I watched you on the feeds. I saw how close they got." Jonas let out a shaky breath, resting a hand over hers. "You shouldn't be here. It's too dangerous." "So is losing you," Lyra replied softly. The word settled warm and heavy in his chest. He touched her waist gently, pulling her closer. Their embrace deepened, slow, quiet, full of the fear and longing they'd carried since he was taken. The cold night faded around them as they held each other in a moment that felt stolen from a different world, one where they didn't have to run. Soren cleared his throat loudly. "I'm glad you two are reconnecting, but we should focus on not dying." Lyra stepped back, though her hand lingered in Jonas's for a moment longer. "I came because I found something important," she said, kneeling to open the small satchel slung across her shoulder. She pulled out a data crystal glowing a faint turquoise. "This is from the corporation's vault. It shows that contestants aren't criminals, they're people marked for removal." Jonas frowned. "Removal?" "Political dissidents," Soren said gravely. "Workers who protested, citizens who questioned authority. They're funneling them into the circuit to make them disappear." Jonas stared at the glowing crystal, anger building like pressure in his chest. "Then they framed me to get rid of me." Lyra nodded. "They think if you die on camera, no one will ask questions." Before Jonas could respond, the ground trembled, light at first, then violent. Soren swore. "They're detonating the ridge. Flushing us out." Jonas grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her as rocks split behind them. They sprinted deeper into the ravine, but a dark figure dropped from the cliffs above, landing with a heavy metallic thud. Cade Metrix. His visor lit a cruel amber. "End of the line, hail." Jonas pushed Lyra behind him, every muscle locking with adrenaline. Cade raised his weapon. The fight in the ravine had begun. The tunnels beneath the ridge district felt alive, breathing, groaning, shifting under the pressure of old fault lines. Jonas and Soren moved quietly through the darkness, their footsteps softened by layers of mineral dust. Small crystals glimmered in the walls like trapped stars, casting faint glows that made everything look unreal. "This whole place is a death trap," Soren muttered, tapping one of the walls. "Rock shifts every few hours. If the breakers don't get us, gravity will." Jonas wiped sweat from his brow. "I'll take falling over getting shot." "I wouldn't," Soren said dryly. "At least bullets kill fast." Before Jonas could answer, a soft humming echoed through the tunnel, gentle, melodic, almost warm. It wasn't natural. It wasn't mechanical either. Jonas knew the sound instantly. "Lyra," he breathed. She stepped into the light, emerging from a branching corridor with a dim pulse of violet shimmer surrounding her. Her purple skin seemed to catch every glint of the crystals around them, making her glow softly in the darkness. When her eyes found Jonas, relief washed over her face so raw that his knees nearly buckled. She closed the distance quickly, her hands rising to frame his jaw. "Jonas, I thought I lost you." He didn't hesitate, he pulled her into him. Her forehead rested against his cheek, her breath trembling against his neck. The moment stretched, tender and fierce all at once, their bodies leaning into each other as if they'd both been holding themselves upright for too long. "You shouldn't have come," Jonas whispered into her hair. "Try and stop me," she said softly, lips brushing the line of his jaw. "I'm not letting them take you from me." Soren made a choking noise. "Okay, emotional reunion logged, but we've got bigger problems." Lyra pulled back slightly, though she kept one hand on Jonas's chest as if grounding herself. "I found something," she said, retrieving a small, prism-shaped device from her satchel. It glowed a pale turquoise between her fingers. This is a fragment of the corporation's core archive. I stole it during a shift change. Jonas stared. What's on it? Files showing the chase circuit isn't a punishment, Lyra said. It's a purge. Anyone who speaks against the board disappears into the game. Soren nodded grimly. I've seen pieces of this. They need the public distracted. The circuit gives them a constant spectacle while they wipe out whoever stands in their way. Jonas's stomach twisted. They knew I'd resist. They knew I'd fight back. That's why they framed you, Lyra said quietly. They wanted you gone. The ground rumbled suddenly, stones raining from the ceiling. Soren's eyes widened. That's not natural. They're forcing a collapse. Then came the pounding, metal boots on stone, echoing through the tunnels. Breakers, Jonas hissed. Light flared at the far end of the corridor, harsh and white. A dark silhouette stepped forward, armor gleaming with predatory confidence. Cade Metrics. His voice rolled through the cavern. Hail. You just don't know when to die. Jonas pushed Lyra behind him, muscles tightening, heart thundering with something fierce and unyielding. I know exactly when, Jonas growled. And it's not today. The tunnel erupted into chaos as Cade charged. The scrapyard stretched before them like a graveyard for machines. Jagged metal beams jutted out from the ground, twisted cars stacked like monuments to chaos, and pools of black oil reflected the stormy sky above. Rain began to fall, hammering down on Jonas and Lyra, soaking their clothes and clinging to their skin. Every drop seemed to pulse with tension, as if the storm itself was part of the hunt. We can't outrun them forever, Lyra shouted over the wind, her purple skin glistening under the lightning flashes. She gripped Jonas's arm tightly, dragging him through a narrow passage between two rusted trucks. We have to fight. Jonas's jaw set. Then let's make it count. They moved in rhythm, shadows slipping past shattered walls. The first breaker appeared, metal armor reflecting the lightning like a predator's eyes. Jonas lunged, using a loose pipe as a weapon. Sparks flew as it collided with the breaker's arm, throwing him back. Lyra wasn't idle. She wielded a small device that emitted a burst of electromagnetic pulse, short-circuiting the second breaker's helmet sensors and leaving him stumbling blindly. Nice work, Jonas panted, brushing rain from his eyes. You've been practicing that? She smirked, lips glistening with water. You could say that. She moved close as they fought, their bodies brushing. The intimacy of the moment, a shared heartbeat in the middle of chaos, made Jonas's mind twist with both fear and longing. Then came Cade Metrics, stepping from a pile of scrap, lightning glinting off his visor. Thought you could hide forever, Hale? His voice was mechanical, cold, merciless. Jonas faced him, raising the pipe again. I don't hide. I fight. The battle was brutal. Cade moved faster than human instinct, swinging a reinforced arm at Jonas. Jonas dodged, barely, and countered with a kick that sent Cade staggering back. Lightning illuminated their fierce struggle, casting giant, shifting shadows against the wreckage. Lyra found an opening and threw a small flash grenade at another approaching breaker, the explosion illuminating the scrapyard with blinding light. In that instant, Jonas saw the vulnerability in Cade's stance. He struck, but instead of killing, he used sheer force to knock Cade against a heap of twisted metal, pinning him. Jonas's chest heaved. We're not killers, Jonas said through clenched teeth, eyes locked on Cade. We survive, we don't murder. The storm raged, rain streaming down their faces. Lyra pressed against Jonas, wrapping her arms around his waist, her violet skin shimmering under the storm's light. I knew you could do it, she whispered, trembling with relief and something deeper. Their closeness was a quiet rebellion against the violence surrounding them. Behind them, Soren's voice cracked over the comms. I'm holding back the reinforcements, you've got maybe 10 minutes before they regroup. Jonas pulled Lyra close one last time, forehead to forehead, feeling the electric charge of both the storm and their fear. "We make it out together," he promised. "Together," she echoed, gripping his hands. And then, with Cade temporarily subdued and the breakers momentarily scattered, the two of them slipped through the wreckage, wet, battered, but alive. The storm followed, relentless, as if the world itself wanted to test whether they were truly worthy of surviving the hunt. The horizon glowed faintly, pale gold and rose bleeding into the edges of night. Jonas, Lyra, and Soren crouched on the edge of the cliff above the city ruins, drenched, exhausted, bruised, but alive. The storm had passed, leaving a slick world that reflected the first hints of sunrise. Below them, the circuit's drones hovered like silent predators, scanning for movement. "We've made it this far," Jonas whispered, voice hoarse. "But the show isn't over until they broadcast the final kill." Lyra's violet skin glimmered in the morning light as she moved close, her hand resting against his chest. "Then let's make them watch us survive," she said. There was fire in her eyes, defiance that burned brighter than any fear. Soren handed Jonas a small, salvaged transmitter. "This will hijack the feed. Let everyone see the truth." His grin was reckless, dangerous. "Let them watch us win." Jonas took a deep breath. Together, they set up the device. Lyra's fingers danced over the console, her movements precise despite the exhaustion, rerouting the broadcast signal to every screen in the nation. The dull, hypnotic voice of the announcer, which had filled their ears for weeks, was replaced by the raw footage of survivors, Jonas fighting, Lyra disabling breakers, Soren causing chaos in the shadows. The files she had stolen were displayed on the screens, revealing the corporation's lies. Below, the city stirred as people stopped to stare at the skyward monitors. Disbelief rippled across faces, citizens realizing the spectacle they had been sold was a trap, a purge, a lie. Then came the rumble. Cade and a small team of breakers had tracked them to the cliff edge, weapons drawn. Jonas didn't flinch. Lyra stepped beside him, holding his arm, grounding him. "Ready?" she asked softly. Jonas nodded. "Always." The confrontation was swift. Jonas met Cade head-on, fists and strategy driving him rather than hatred. Lyra, moving like water, disabled a drone with another pulse device, sending sparks and wires flying. Soren used the distraction to block the remaining breakers, creating a shield of debris. The fight was brutal, raw, a storm of human and machine. Finally, Cade faltered, his armor damaged, pride shattered. Jonas held his gaze. "We're not your entertainment. We're not prey. We're people." He didn't strike again, letting Cade stumble back, defeated in front of the cameras, exposed. As the sun rose fully over the ruins, the trio stood together. Sweat and rain mixed with blood, grime, and relief. Lyra leaned into Jonas, resting her head on his shoulder. "We survived," she whispered. "We did," he said, wrapping his arms around her, feeling her warmth, her presence, the stubborn hope they'd clung to. Soren clapped him on the back, grinning. "And the whole country saw it. Now everyone knows the truth." From below, cheers erupted. The broadcast had ignited resistance, outrage, and hope all at once. The corporation would never control the narrative again. Jonas looked out over the city, over the ruined streets and broken machines, and finally allowed himself to breathe. Lyra squeezed his hand, and in that simple touch was everything he had been fighting for: survival, love, and the promise of a new dawn. As the sun climbed higher, the cliffside glistened with rain and sweat, and Jonas, Lyra, and Soren walked down into the ruins, ready to rebuild, not just their lives, but the world that had tried to break them. The hunt was over. The survivors had won. The city had changed overnight. Screens once filled with mindless spectacle now broadcast truth, clips of Jonas, Lyra, and Soren surviving the circuit, exposing the corporation's cruelty. Crowds gathered in the streets, chanting, waving makeshift banners, some holding torches. The sound was thunderous, alive, and it reminded Jonas of what they had been fighting for, not just survival, but freedom. Jonas and Lyra stood atop a crumbling rooftop, surveying the awakening city below. Her violet skin glimmered under the morning light, soaked from the night's rain, but her eyes were fierce, determined. She linked her fingers with his, fingers intertwining naturally, silently affirming they had endured together. "People are waking up," Jonas said, voice low. "I thought the circuit had taken everything from us, but look." Lyra followed his gaze. "It's more than that," she whispered. "They're organizing. Resisting. We've lit something inside them they can't unsee." Soren emerged from the shadows behind them, carrying a bundle of scavenged comm devices. "We've got to act fast. The corporation won't just let this slide. They'll regroup, and soon." Jonas frowned. "We've barely had a chance to breathe." "Breathing doesn't win revolutions," Soren said bluntly. "Action does." They moved through the streets, blending into the crowds. Even though people cheered their names, the trio stayed careful, avoiding cameras and patrolling drones. Whispers followed them, they survived the hunt. They're not prey. They're heroes. Lyra's hand brushed against Jonas's as they navigated the streets. Her touch was electric, grounding him amid chaos, a reminder that there was something worth fighting for beyond the fight itself. The tension between them had grown during the hunt, but now it transformed into something tender, intimate, a shared heartbeat against the storm of rebellion. They reached the remains of the old corporation tower, now partially overtaken by protesters. Jonas felt a wave of defiance, a need to reclaim what had been stolen from him. "We take the tower," he said quietly, determination coiling in his chest. "We expose every lie they've hidden." Soren grinned, already setting up equipment to intercept the corporation's internal comms. "I like your style," he said. "Let's crash their private feeds, show them how it feels to be hunted for a change." Light flashed across the city as drones swooped low, scanning. Jonas and Lyra ducked behind debris, pressed together, their bodies close for protection and warmth. Lyra's violet skin seemed to glow softly, a beacon amidst the chaos. "We can do this," she murmured, her forehead resting against his shoulder. "Together." Jonas closed his eyes, inhaling the storm, the fear, the hope. "Together," he echoed. As night fell, the city below became a battlefield of screens, protesters, and armored drones. The trio moved like shadows, hacking feeds, exposing corruption, igniting sparks of rebellion in every neighborhood. The hunt might have ended, but the war for freedom, and their lives, was only beginning. The city was alive with fire and light. Smoke curled into the sky as protesters clashed with the corporation's remaining enforcers. Jonas, Lyra, and Soren moved like shadows through the chaos, their steps precise, hearts pounding. Every corner held danger, every rooftop, every alley could be a trap, but they pressed forward, driven by the knowledge that this was the last stand. "We split up," Soren whispered, checking the devices strapped across his chest. "I'll take the control hub. You two head for the broadcast tower. Expose everything." Lyra's violet skin shimmered in the glow of fires below, droplets of rain and sweat clinging to her like liquid light. She reached for Jonas's hand, squeezing it tight. "We'll come back together," she promised. Her touch sent a shiver of determination through him. Jonas nodded. Together. They raced across rooftops, dodging patrol drones, leaping over shattered stairways, landing on debris-strewn streets. The city roared below them, voices raised in both fear and hope. Jonas could feel the pulse of rebellion in every shout, every footstep. Inside the broadcast tower, Cade Metrix waited, his visor glowing with cold amber light. He had rebuilt his forces, but the defiance in Jonas's eyes was unmistakable. "Hail," Cade said, his voice mechanical, controlled, "this ends now." Jonas stepped forward, fists clenched. "No, Cade. It ends when the truth comes out. The fight was brutal, a clash of human and machine, metal against bone, strategy against instinct. Lyra joined mid-fight, moving with fluid precision, her violet skin reflecting the strobe of emergency lights. Together, they disabled drones, disarmed enforcers, and pushed Cade back. In a moment of calm between blows, Lyra pressed her forehead to Jonas's, whispering, "We've made it this far, don't lose yourself now." Jonas swallowed, letting the warmth of her presence steady him. He struck, disarming Cade and pinning him against a console. "Look around," he said, voice steady. "You've lost. We're not afraid anymore." Soren's voice crackled over the comms. "Feeds are live. The entire nation is watching." Screens around the city flickered to life, showing unedited footage, the hunt, the brutality, the lies, every moment the corporation tried to hide. Citizens gasped, cheered, and rose up in unison. The balance of power shifted in a single heartbeat. Lyra wrapped her arms around Jonas, a mix of relief and triumph flooding her violet glow. "We did it," she breathed. Jonas pressed a kiss to her forehead, feeling the weight of everything lift slightly. "We survived," he murmured. "And they'll never control us again." Cade and the remaining enforcers were rounded up, their threat neutralized, but Jonas, Lyra, and Soren didn't celebrate. There was work to rebuild, to protect the city, to guide the people who now believed in freedom. As dawn broke fully, casting gold across shattered streets and victory banners, Jonas looked out over the city. Lyra rested her head on his shoulder, Soren at his side. For the first time in weeks, there was silence, a moment of peace amidst the chaos. The hunt was over. The uprising had begun. Love, courage, and truth had survived. And together, they would shape the world beyond the fear that once hunted them.